I've never met, which is awesome. I see all your names coming through, but it's nice to see some people here. Very cool. Let's see who else we have. About 250 or 260 people signed up for this today, so we've got a lot of people joining us. We're gonna make sure everybody can get into the room and tell y'all a little bit about what's happening. Hello everybody, good to see y'all. Just scrolling through some names here. Awesome. And just a reminder, if you do have your mic open, if you could mute that for us. I'll talk through, let you know how we're going to handle the Q&A for today too, which will hopefully help us with all this. Awesome. All right, a few more in the room. I'm just going to keep letting everybody in. While we're doing that, actually, Karin, can I make you the host while we let people in, and I'll do a quick intro?
Absolutely.
Is that cool? And then, yeah, I don't know what this co-host feature went away, but now you can let people in the room.
I have the same problem on my Zoom.
Okay, 155, 57, 58. Cool. People are coming in. Awesome. Hello, everybody. Good to see y'all. My name is Tim Friedlander. I am the founder and president of the National Association of Voice Actors. Nice little pillow right here. Nice Christmas gift from Karin. And I want to tell you a little bit about what we're doing today, what this series is, a little bit about NAVA, for those of you who aren't familiar, and then a few things we're going to jump in. We've got Zeke Alton here, who is going to help us run through this whole process. Karin Gilfrey, who is our vice president, who is up there, and Michael Scott, one of our advisory board members. And I think we had a few other NAVA advisory members here as well. I'll see if they are here. So first of all, National Association of Voice Actors. We are new as of November, and we are both a 501c6 and a 501c3. We have the National Association of Voice Actors, which is our association to advocate and promote for voice acting through benefits, education, advocacy, action, including our healthcare, access to healthcare, which closes on Friday for anybody who's interested in access to healthcare. That's a whole separate discussion, but you're welcome to email me and we can give you all that information. Once we have everybody in the room, I'll drop some links into the chat for everybody. One of the things that we really wanted to do with NAVA is this education side of things. And we wanted to start with, sorry, my computer's restarting on the other room and it's yelling at me right now. Sorry, I get distracted. I can't handle so many things at one time. All right, stop. So we wanted to, so we have the Brad Venable Scholarship, which is our 501c3, the Brad Venable Fund, and NAVA, which is our 501c6. And what we wanted to do, for anybody who knew Brad, he was a huge advocate for education, especially advocacy for voice actors, knowing your contracts, knowing your worth, knowing the value of the work you have, and knowing not only whether that's a union contract or a non-union contract, for us to know what is in those contracts and be able to advocate for ourselves. So we are going to, as we progress forward with this, the Brad Venable Fund is going to grow. That becomes our community fund that we can help provide scholarships or financial aid or other things for voice actors in the community. And one of the things we wanted to start with was this open to the community event that we have here. This is open for everybody, regardless of your membership in NAVA or not. There are some other member benefits that you get by being in NAVA, but it's something that we think is important for the entire community. So this is open to everybody in the community. With that, along those lines, if you do find value in this, and we do hope that you do, we would just ask that you provide some kind of donation to the Brad Venable Fund, $1 or anything that you would like to. That goes to the 501c3. It's fully tax deductible, and it's something that we're going to continue to offer for free to the community. If you feel like making a donation, that would be great. It will help us out, and we'll come back. All the money goes into this goes directly back to voice actors in the community, and allows us to help other voice actors. Karin and I, through our different groups in the last 18 months or so, donated probably $50,000 or $60,000 to voice actors, New York and California, all across the country. So we'd love to be able to continue to do that. Yes, actually, Amazon Smile, we do actually, as of 2 days ago, have, if you look for the National Association on Voice Actors, on Amazon Smile, you'll find us, and you could actually select that. And anything you purchase gets a donation towards the National Association of Voice Actors. Will go into the Brad Venable Fund. I will drop that a few links in there once we have everybody in the room. So anything else I'm missing, Karen, on that? We'll jump into.
Think so. I think that's
okay.
I think that's great. And it looks like
Awesome.
pretty much everybody is in. I can still man the admittance if you want for a few
if you want
minutes.
if you want to handle that for a bit. And then I know
sure.
Karen's gonna go. She just popped in to say hi to everybody here.
And I'll stay for a bit, but
stay for a little bit. Okay, cool. That's nice. So I'm gonna grab some links. So what I'm gonna do, we have a Google Doc, and we're gonna drop that in the chat. If you have questions, go ahead and write them in that Google Doc as we go through. The Google Doc is right there. And what we'll be able to do is you can see that, you can see your question. If it gets answered, just go back into that Google Doc, either check it off, put a strike through, or delete it so that we know it's been answered. One thing Zeke has done, and once we get into this, you'll see that all of the slides are numbered. So if you have a question about a specific slide, you can also put that question in the Google Doc as well, so that we can reference that and hopefully get back there and make that easy for everybody to access and see. We are here purely for education. We are going to provide as much education about contracts as possible. I am a voice actor, a studio owner. I do casting. I'm a signatory. I run payroll. I kind of run the gamut in this industry, and I see the contracts from all different sides. I'm helping everybody from all different perspectives in this. So I have a perspective on what I've seen. I have some experience. I'm not a lawyer, so we recommend you can have some legal advice on anything that you need. What our goal today is to give you some information about terms, what you would find in a general contract, some things that are important for us to look for. And then as we go through this kind of contract series, we're going to go through and dig into every single one of the SAG-AFTRA contracts and look at how they relate to voice actors. So there's very specific information in there. So this is step one. This is our first kind of foundational setup here for us to kind of get an idea of what's in these contracts. And then we're going to work our way through Zeke and anybody else that we can bring in with us. Zeke is our point person on this. And I'll introduce him in a second. He'll be able to give you some info on exactly what's happening. I'm going to drop the donation link here really quick in the chat. And that should get us going. Hopefully everybody is seeing the Google Doc, and we can leave questions on that Google Doc. And I just dropped in the donation link, and I'm going to drop in, if anybody hasn't had a chance yet to check it out, this is our website. Let me put it with the right thing so everybody can see it. And take a look at that. If you have any questions on healthcare, we are under time sensitive. If you're interested in access to the healthcare, that open enrollment closes this Friday. So with that said, let's get down to business. So over here, we have one of our advisory board members. We have Zeke Alton, and I'm going to let Zeke take it from here. He's going to tell you all about kind of his background, what he does, and what our plan is for today.
All right. Thanks, Ted.
Zeke.
First, wow, there's a lot of you. So thank you so much for taking your time on this holiday. Happy Martin Luther King Day to everyone. And what we're going to do basically here is go over what I call Contracts 101. So those of you that are savvy and been doing this a long time, you're not really going to see anything new. But this is an effort to educate our entire community on the basis of what contracts are and the kind of things that we're seeing in them. And then as we move forward through the program, talking about individual contracts and individual genres within the industry, we'll dive deeper. I've only got 20 slides for you today. They're numbered, like Tim said. So if a question comes up on a slide, feel free to write that down. When we get to the Q&A, which we should get to quickly, I would like to, then we'll just pull that slide back up and jump right in so that we're all on the same page. One thing Tim is going to do is he is going to read every question off of the Google Sheet, because this is a recording and so people cannot see the Google Sheet. That way we'll actually get all of the questions on record before we dive in and start answering them.
And to answer that, someone did just ask in the question if it was going to be recorded. This will be recorded. It'll be on the NAVA website under the news page. If you want to go to the NAVA website, all of our webinars are archived on the news page, so you can see all the healthcare webinars we've had already. So yes, this will be recorded.
Yep, and the slides will be available to you because there's a lot of definitions of words and weird things that you may not be familiar with in the slides. So let's get going. First, who am I? My name is Zeke Alton. I am an actor performer. You'll hear me say repeatedly over the course of this that I am not a lawyer. So what is my level of expertise with respect to this? I am an elected member of the SAG-AFTRA LA local board. I have been for the last 2 years. I volunteer on committees at SAG-AFTRA, which is where most of the work of the union gets done. Committees for performance capture, video games, podcasts, self-tapes, the governance of the union itself, and many, many more. That has given me an exposure to all of the contracts that SAG-AFTRA uses, including all the ones that pertain to the genres in VO. I have further familiarity with contracts because before I mean, most of us either have a survival job or had a career prior to doing voiceover. My career before being an actor was I was an acquisition officer and test pilot for the US Navy. What that means is I was essentially on the producer side of union work and contracts, trying to figure out how to minimize the cost of resources, which in this case would be voice actors, and minimize the amount of schedule needed to get the job done. And so I'm intimately familiar with working contracts and negotiating against unions. Now in my new life, I negotiate as part of SAG-AFTRA against the employers, or with the employers. I guess against is a little bit too combative. So that's where my experience comes from. As I've said, the slides are numbered. We'll step right through and hopefully get to questions as soon as we can. Here, I'll go and... Got that, Tim?
That looks good.
One?
Contracts 101. Everybody's seeing that. Awesome.
All right.
There we go.
If you take nothing away from today but one thing, it is that you need to read your contracts. If you are an actor, or even if you don't consider yourself an actor and consider yourself a voiceover, which I think is a misnomer, all of us that do voice work are actors, you are a business. Whether you want it to be or not, there is no such thing in the world of I just want to be an actor and have somebody else take care of the rest of it for me. If you do that, then what you have is a hobby. You don't have a business. So you need to start to get in the habit of reading your contracts. We all understand that they're written in legalese and it's mumbo jumbo and your eyes start to glaze over, but you over time start to read the things. We're going to point out some things that you should be looking for in your contracts so you better understand. Now we are a community. And NAVA is here to educate us about what we are all doing as a whole, so you can compare your contracts and what you're doing and the things that you're seeing to other members here, what the industry standards are. And that's why we'll tend to point towards SAG-AFTRA, because the 160,000 members of SAG-AFTRA do their best to set the standard on what work conditions and minimum pay and things like that are in our industry. And we want to help you avoid risks in your career. I mean, we all know that artificial intelligence, synthetic doubles, and synthetic voices are here. They are a thing now. There is not anything in law precedent or copyright yet that is really out there to protect us as the performer and creator. So we need to have an understanding of the kind of things that are going into contracts that can support us and things that don't support us. Why am I not getting it moving to the next slide? Oh, there we go. Okay, so you get a job as a voiceover. What kind of paperwork happens? All right, so the first thing that we'll talk about is pay and tax documents. An I-9, and we have to qualify that really what I'm talking about here is working within the United States. Some of these rules are different when you're not working with the US IRS or you're working with outside in foreign countries where unions don't have jurisdiction. But generally, if you get hired for a job, they're going to have to do an I-9, which is your eligibility to work. And then depending on whether or not they're hiring you as an employee or as an independent contractor, you will file a W-4 or a W-9. I'll dive into all of these individually. I'm just going to give you an overview right now. Separately, you will have a performers contract. If you're working a union job, that performers contract is already something that's pre-established. If you are an independent contractor or doing non-union work or non-jurisdictional work, that's really kind of on you and your legal team to make sure that you have the right contract that serves you. You may be given a contract by the employer. You are well within your rights to both negotiate that or to provide your own contract. Along with that, we see things that we call contract riders or addenda or a separate, what they call assignment of rights document. And If you're working with the union, you'll get a union performer contract, and then most companies will send a rider or addendum along with it. If you are negotiating individually as an independent contractor, you have your contract, the employer may have their contract. Whichever one you decide to use, the other person can provide additional riders or additional addenda to the contract to meet certain requirements. A good example of that is if you are signing on to do an independent contractor job and you want to provide your own rider that covers your safety against abuse with respect to artificial intelligence or synthetic voices. And we'll dive into that a little more as we get on. And the last thing that we start to see regularly is non-disclosure agreements. And we'll stay basic. What that means is you sign something that says that you won't disclose any of the information that you have learned in working with this job at a certain term or up to a certain point or in perpetuity for the rest of your life. You'll just hold their secret. So our pay and tax documents. If you're not familiar with these, I would recommend that you download a fillable PDF version of this every time you get a job and work for a new employer. If you are working as an employee, you'll be signing a W-4. If you're working either as an independent contractor or you're working through a loan out company, you'll provide them with a W-9. These are legal documents that are required in order for them to onboard you and process you so that they can pay you. Then there's the performer's contract. Now, what I've chosen to show you here is the interactive, the video game contract from the SAG-AFTRA Interactive Media Agreement. Basically, the purpose of this performer's contract is for you to determine what are the terms under which you do this work. In this particular contract, the terms are laid out, and on top of that, there's a timesheet on it. Now, those documents can come in separated. There is actually another union version of this. This is an Exhibit A. There's an Exhibit C, where the performer contract is one thing and the timesheet is another. Why is it important to have both of them? The performer contract is the deal that you sign that says you are employing me to do this for you. And the timesheet says, this is what I actually did. Now, we're not expected to read this. This is just to give you some sort of indication of what the riders or addendums may look like. I'll speak from a union perspective here because that's really where my expertise lies. The union puts together these agreements. We call them contracts, but the union refers to them as agreements in different genres within the VO world. So there is a video game agreement, there's a commercial agreement, there's a co-ed industrial agreement, there's a podcast agreement. Within those contracts, there are lots of different provisions laid out. But some employers, and in some cases talent, think that there are provisions that are not covered by the contract or need to be laid out more explicitly or articulated more clearly. And so either party in a business relationship can add a contract rider or addendum that basically speaks to things that they want to get more granularity on than the initial agreement. So what's in those kind of things? Well, if you as a talent are providing a rider to a business, it could be provisions to protect against abuse and unauthorized use, sale, et cetera, of your work. You could put in a rider that says that you hold the intellectual property to that work. Ones that we see from employers generally are looking for expanded rights above and beyond what's in the standard contracts. So assignments of rights, and we'll talk about this a little bit, moral rights, transformative rights, rights to use the results and proceeds of a work, work made for hire, all of those kind of things can be slapped into a rider or addendum. You can talk a little bit about loan out provisions if they're not in a broader contract. You can put in additions for either paid or included publicity, promo, all those kind of things. There should be a provision there on what are the governing laws? Where is your contract valid? Is it valid in the state of California, as most SAG-AFTRA contracts are, or are you using the legal rules of New York? That is important to know because if you come to arbitration or if you have to have a disagreement over a contract, you do want to know the laws of what state apply. And then there's something among many other things called severability, which is essentially something that people like to put in riders that says, if any one piece of our contract is found to be unlawful or needs to be removed, the rest of the contract maintains in in place, meaning you can sever the piece that is not allowed, but the rest of the contract is no longer null and void. And then the last thing is a non-disclosure agreement. Some interesting notes on non-disclosure agreements. This is actually a video game non-disclosure agreement from the company Naughty Dog. It's not a bad one. I'll give you a second to read through, and while you're reading through, I'll point out that if you are in the union, we are often given non-disclosure agreements in order to audition or to do work. If those non-disclosure agreements are not cleared by the union, they actually have no bearing. If you're outside of the union working as an independent contractor, then whatever you choose to sign is whatever you choose to sign. We've seen some really egregious ones. The worst one I think I saw was I did an on-camera commercial, and the NDA said that even after the on-camera commercial is out in public and airing, we were still not allowed to say that we were in it, which I thought was a little bit silly. But I myself, and this was Apple, I myself lined that provision out and signed it because I wasn't going to sign up for that. You always have the right as a performer, as one half of a business transaction, to bring your negotiations to the table. Oftentimes, I think we feel like we don't have any of the power. You have to treat yourself as a business and understand that sometimes if somebody is trying to sign you up to something that is egregiously taking away your rights, it's usually better to walk away from the job. That is the power that you have. Okay, let's talk about some important contract provisions. I don't know how that line got on the screen, by the way, Tim.
Just say the same thing. Me neither. That's a good question.
We're all editing.
See where that came from. Yeah, apparently.
These important contract provisions come to us through NAVA from an organization called the Vocal Variants, which is a group of voice actors that got together, stays in contact with the union, and has sort of been having conversations about the future of rights, particularly with respect to AI and synthetic voice. So these are basically six tent poles that the Vocal Variants and NAVA on top of them feel that are very important, that anyone as talent should know and be able to bring to their lawyer to create some language to protect themselves. First, explicit limits on the use of results and proceeds. And by the way, I have a slide on each one of these, so I'm just going to hit the top level now. The ability for you to consent to use, and I will cover the difference between passive consent and active consent. Appropriate payment for use, so they just don't take what it is that you did and then use it forever in perpetuity throughout the universe without compensating you. Safe storage and tracking of a performer's likeness, the performance, and all the products created from them. The ability to opt out if someone violates the contract or something strange happens that you need to get out of it, and or term limits for the use of whatever it is that you're giving. And clearly denoted exclusivity so that you as a performer don't get bound into a contract or that you can't get away from and basically get rid of other work for yourself. I think somebody took control of it. There it is. So explicit limits on the use of results and proceeds of it. And I've got synthetic model here because these slides come from the Vocal Variants. So in the United States, historically, results and proceeds, which are essentially, if you go in to record something and then you give that recording to an employer, that is done as what's called a work for hire or a work made for hire, which means even though you as the talent recorded it, the intellectual property rights and the copyright belong to the person who commissioned it. Anything that comes out of that, whether they do post-production to it, whether they edit it and move things around, or whether they feed it into machine learning to create a model of you, all of those are results and proceeds. What we're starting to see in contracts is employers want essentially carte blanche of all the rights on all the results and proceeds that come out of the work that you do. You can sign that contract. You just need to be aware of what you're signing away, which is your intellectual property and your ability to say anything about it once you release it to them. Lately, we've been seeing new terms come in, and this is within the last year and even 6 months, where employers have been adding new terms like new exploitation rights, transformative rights, and any and all rights now or that may exist in the future. That should be red flags to us as performers, because what they're betting on is that future technology will allow them to continue to use work without ever asking you or paying you for what you did originally. Ability for performer to consent. So we'll talk briefly about the difference between passive consent and active consent. There are a few actual contract models out there that some AI companies and some technology companies and even studios have put together that don't really talk about it, but the template is a passive consent template, whereas you as the performer are essentially giving away the rights to everything except things that you explicitly articulate. The opposite of that, which is much more favorable to the performer, is active consent, where you do not give any rights except what you explicitly articulate. I want to make sure that we're very clear on that, so I'll say it again. Passive consent means I'm giving you a thing. You can do whatever you want with it except 1, 2, and 3. Active consent is I'm giving you a thing, you can do 1, 2, and 3 with it, and anything else you want to do in the future, you have to come back and renegotiate, or we set terms where you pay me again to continue use into different areas. Very important for us as talent. You can understand that our incentive is to ensure that we have active consent. Most employers' incentive is to ensure that we have passive consent because they want as much as they can. Appropriate payment for use. And that can come in all kinds of different things: session fees, studio fees, editing fees, your home booth fee, hosting fees, you name it. There's also the concepts of secondary compensation. Are you being paid initially and your work bought outright, or is there some sort of usage schedule? Is there some sort of residual? Is there some sort of royalty? You have to be aware that your compensation breaks down in those different ways. So if you're invoicing someone, or if you're getting checks through a union job, you understand exactly what you're getting paid for. This is a big one. And this is one we're working on with technology companies and trying to understand the best way to move forward with this: safe storage and tracking of all products. So we know that deepfakes are going to continue to evolve. They're going to become more widespread. The state of California has an anti-deepfake law right now, but there's not a great deal of legislation across the United States that covers this kind of stuff. So you can count that the employers that we're working for are figuring out how to track the products that they make, because that's how they get paid. So what we need to make sure contractually and practically as talent providing services to employers, that if they're tracking it to ensure that they get paid, that we have some way of also tracking to ensure that if there is a secondary payment for us or a guarantee of usage in a confined box, that we know that that's happening. So you don't have to look on TikTok one day and go, that sounds like my voice that someone's using across the world. It is really advantageous, and our incentive is to ensure that wherever our work or a model of our work or our voice is, that it's tracked. We know where it's stored. If it is sold to someone else, that tracking goes with it. The rights to the things go with it if it's sold to somebody else. And ideally, this would be an independent third party. But again, the technology within the industry doesn't quite exist to do this yet. One of the things that NAVA is doing research into figuring out how do we do that to ensure that you don't just do a single session, somebody takes the results and proceeds from it, and it's no longer trackable and your voice is out there for anyone to use without any compensation or consent on your part. And then the ability to opt out. So term and termination. Term is how long are you signing up to do this work, or how long are you signing up for somebody to take this work that you've given them and for them to use it? Do they own it forever? We're always afraid of the terms in perpetuity throughout the universe. In some cases, that is acceptable. You just have to be aware what you're signing. So that's term and termination. What happens if one of you wants to get out of the contract? You don't want to put yourself in a contractual position where the employer can cut the contract at any times, but you are bound to it. And then clearly denoted exclusivity. We've all heard, that if you do a Pepsi commercial, Coke is not going to hire you because they don't want your voice or your performance or your name and likeness representing another brand. If you're signing a contract to do any sort of work, you need to ensure, are you exclusive to that company? Is that a company exclusive to you? And those are terms from both sides that need to be agreed before you put your name on the line, so that you don't put yourself in a position where you took one paycheck and now you can't take any of the others because you're exclusive to one employer. Okay. Some notes on union contracts, because as I said, I sit on the board of the union. I do a lot of work with the contracts for SAG-AFTRA. The only contract you are required to sign for a voiceover job, if it is a SAG-AFTRA job, is the performer contract that comes out of the larger agreement. If they also provide an NDA and a rider or an addendum or an assignment of rights, you're actually not required to sign that in order to work. What we're starting to see lately is those contracts are being delivered through digital signing platforms like HelloSign and DocuSign, and they're delivered all as one document without the opportunity to edit. You either sign everything or cancel it and send it back. The best advice that I can give a performer in that case is if you don't like something in the rider or you don't like something in the NDA, there's always an email address of whoever sent you that DocuSign. Sometimes it comes through your agents, by the way. A lot of the times it comes directly from the employer bypassing your agent, and it never goes through the union. So you may be the only person reading this. If you're not comfortable with it, I would recommend sending it to the union. Even if you're non-union, I would recommend sending it to the union because they like to track what people are trying to feed into contracts. If you have an agent, I would send it to your agent. And I would also highly recommend that you send it back to whoever sent it to you at the payroll company and have them split it up into 3 different signature piles. Your performer contract, your NDA, and then whatever additional riders. Then you can actually sign your performer contract and go to work. And then you can sign the NDA and the rider separately if you so choose after you've had your legal people or the union legal people or your agent take a good look at it to ensure that you're not being abused or set up. So I've used a lot of terms that some of you may not know. So there's some really key ones that we wanted to make sure that you knew. And like I said, these slides will be available to you. So you'll be able to look at this and refer back in the future. So artificial intelligence, this is the Merriam-Webster definition of artificial intelligence. There's a lot of different definitions out there. Why it's important here is I think we need to ensure as a community that we separate artificial intelligence from synthetic voice. Artificial intelligence is a computer thing. It is essentially the branch of computer science that is trying to make computers think like human beings. Most of the world, particularly outside of entertainment, does not conflate that with synthetic voices. Synthetic voices or digital doubles or digital reproductions or voice models are just a small portion of what makes up the computer science that is AI. So with the union, like to refer to it as digital doubling. Just be aware that the words are important, and we try not to use AI to cover all of synthetic voices because the AI companies are doing so much else with their AI other than synthetic voices. Character simulation provisions. You may have seen these in contracts. I can tell you right now that they are in contracts for live action dubbing, anime dubbing. I've seen them in contracts for TV animation. Originally, a character simulation provision was designed so that if they hire you to do a job and then need to come and get pickups and you're not available or you're a celebrity and they don't want to pay you your celebrity rate, they can bring in someone to voice match you. That was what it was originally designed to do. And I think as performers, we were all okay with that because it allowed that community of voice matchers to have a lot of work. What is starting to be added to the provisions are words like in all media and by all technologies and processes now known or hereafter developed throughout the universe in perpetuity. That is specifically from an entertainment contract. The addition of the all technologies now or hereafter developed sets the legal precedent for them to take whatever you did, feed it into an AI machine, create a model of you, and then use that. And usually in our contracts, it allows them to use that without further compensation or consent of the actor. So that's something that you just need to be aware of when you're starting to see character simulation provisions. I would recommend that if you see any of those, you can send them to the voiceover department of SAG-AFTRA, whether or not you're a member, because they use that to, as I said, better understand what's happening within industry contracts. Some more basics. Intellectual property, basically a property that is not a tangible thing, it is an idea. Copyright is its whole own section of law, and it deals with who owns a thing. And that is very important to us because although we are talent and we are originating a lot of things, most of the time we don't own the thing. And I'll explain why. Do you have a thought, Tim? You look like you had a thought.
Not in relation to this. No, sorry.
Okay.
With something else. Other question.
Okay. And you've heard me use the term results and proceeds a lot already. Results and proceeds are usually a defined term that is within a contract. It is defined by the contract, and it basically says anything you do or anything that comes of anything that you do, which is very broad. What's important there is in most US contracts for entertainment, intellectual property is made, as I said, as a work for hire. And that is a copyright term that essentially says, even though I'm the talent, even if I'm improving and originating a thing, if I have been commissioned by a producer to make that thing, the copyright does not belong to me, it belongs to the producer. If that's in all the contracts that you sign, you are signing away your intellectual property. And as a standard, for the most part, we all do that. The reason that we do that is because I'm not going to own Mickey Mouse or Spider-Man. So if I'm performing as a character that belongs to Disney or Warner Brothers or Paramount, they own that character. So I'm doing a work made for hire that then they own. What we are trying to do is, within the terms of our contracts, ensure that the character that we are a part of is something that we continue to be a part of and not be hired once, modeled, and then discarded. Something I see in every single contract is the granting of what's called moral rights, which are essentially the right to credit, attribution, or the right to edit, chop up, or change a work. More often than not, we are signing away our moral rights within writers or addenda. And here's a really interesting one that I've started to see in the last couple of months. And this is new exploitation rights. I will talk slowly, so if you want to read the legal language, you may, but I will give you the layperson's definition, which is what they're saying is any rights that exist now, or any rights that we come up with in the future, right to credit, right to attribution, right to use, right to make an AI model of, any rights that anyone can design in the future, you are already deciding to sign over those rights to the employer that you work for. It's a wonderful catch-all for them. So if AI gets to the point where, if AI technology gets to the point where it can synthetically model the full likeness, voice, and face of a character, if you sign away all new exploitation rights, essentially you're saying that whatever technology you come up with in the future that allows you to model me without me there, I'm giving you the rights to go ahead and do that without any compensation, without my consent. So from a legal standpoint, for a performer, this is a dangerous rights set that we're looking to give away. Other terms that we're starting to see in contracts are things like transformative rights, the ability to take what it is that you've given them and transform it some way beyond normal post-processing and editing. So what NAVA will do is we'll maintain a glossary of the things that we're starting to see in contracts so that you can go to the NAVA website, into the education portal, and take a look and go, okay, I saw something really strange or new in the contract. Let me reach out to NAVA, or let me go to the glossary and see if they have a layperson's explanation of what it is that's actually happening here in the contract. And then there's this other interesting thing. This is not assignment of rights. This is assumption of rights. As a performer, if I am doing a job for company A, and company A takes the results and proceeds of the job that I have and decides to then sell their product or sell their company to company B, what happens to the contract that exists between me and company A? There's a provision in contracts called the transfer or assumption of rights that essentially says that all the contractual agreement that I have with company A, if they sell it or move it, they have to do a written agreement with company B so that they take on, yes, we agree to the original contract provisions. We have seen this abused quite a bit. So that's why I'm bringing it up, because I think it's important for us as talent to know and understand that if you have a contract with a company, you need to have a transfer or assumption of rights put in by your lawyer to ensure that they can't just sell it to evade the provisions of your contract. So that's a lot. And at this point, I think we should jump in and see if there are any. I haven't seen the chat or the Google Docs. So I don't know if there are any questions.
We've got a ton of questions in there. If anything was answered, if anything was answered, but you had a question, just go ahead and mark it off. I'll go through and read those. I do want to just touch on something here real quickly. So a lot of this is we're talking about from the SAG-AFTRA standpoint, because that's where the contracts exist. But NAVA itself is union, non-union, FICO, or whatever you're in, wherever you are in the industry. So we want to help you with that. But just to make clear that our focus, the contracts currently exist in SAG-AFTRA because that's the entity that has developed these and made these for us. So that's why we use these, and they're a great platform for us to use. Part of the problem, though, is if you're not in SAG-AFTRA, you don't have that protection. So trying to find a way for us to do this. So let's jump into.
Can I add to that, Tim?
Yes.
Generally, we start with the SAG-AFTRA contracts because they're a good industry-wide standard that sets a minimum pay and a minimum set of safe working conditions. Mm-hmm. There are also other organizations out there that NAVA helps to support, like the GVAA, and there are other places out there that have rate guides that are not union specific, but are still looking to maintain fair compensation rates and fair working conditions for performers. I just happen to come from SAG-AFTRA, so that's sort of the baseline from which I bring everything.
Yeah. Awesome. So let's jump into first question. So first question, Michelle Francine, where can we find a good entertainment lawyer? This is a great question. One that there's a voiceover specific. Robert Siglampaglia is the name that comes up a lot in the voiceover community, but he is a single person. He can only do so much on his own. So I currently don't have a list. There's an entertainment lawyer that I've worked with in Burbank, but part of it, hopefully maybe that's something that we can find. If somebody has some good entertainment lawyers they worked with, we would love to take those references and we could add those, maybe provide a resource for people who have that. For me, I found it by just asking around and asking people who have worked with somebody, it's not very common. I don't know a lot of people who have actually worked or engaged an entertainment lawyer prior to having a problem with something. It's usually after the fact that something comes up, and people then get to the point where they find it, have to get a lawyer. Any other thoughts on that, Zeke or Karen or Michael? And Andy Danish is here. Perhaps a good plan for entertainment lawyers. I have a legal service I use. Yeah, great. Lawrence, great. Something like that. Maybe we could find. Part of it is finding, as we know, a lot of things is finding somebody who is familiar with voiceover specific stuff, because as much as it is entertainment, there are unique aspects to it that are important to understand.
One other resources, if you have an agent, you can probably ask your agent if they have an entertainment lawyer that they use, because agents use lawyers all the time. So your agent might have a resource, and if it's a contract that you're working on through your agent, that might be a great way for them to absorb that cost instead of you, to tell them that you want it to be reviewed by their lawyer. So keep that in mind.
And this is something that I do want to again, maybe preface, and I'm not sure if maybe you can speak to this, Zeke. That we run the risk, and I guess this is union or non-union, is pushing back or questioning a contract very easily to get dropped from a job. We have the first day NAVA went online, somebody reached out with a synthetic voice question. We helped them out. Unfortunately, the client said, okay, well, if you're going to ask these questions, then this isn't probably the right job for you. That is a danger. Unfortunately, there is a risk that this happens. So is there anything that we can do prior to signing that contract? Is there anything that we can do? Otherwise, do we just run the risk of, when we question these things, either be fully prepared to lose that job if there's pushback, or do we have any protection in any capacity to question a contract without feeling that we're going to get kicked out of a job?
You always run the risk of losing the job. It's especially if you are an independent contractor. One of the advantages of being a member of the union, and most people don't realize this, is you actually have your own legal team. I am not going to sue Disney. That ain't going to work for me.
Right.
But I repeatedly have had the union legal team approach studios, networks on my behalf and fix the contracts. That way it's not me arguing, and I'm also free to do the job. I'm even free to sign a bad contract because I know I have $1 million legal team to support me. That's one of the amazing advantages of being at the union. If you are not at the union, you are at much greater risk, because it is down to whoever your personal legal team is, to not only ensure that the contract is correct, but ensure if somebody violates it, that they can do something on your behalf.
Karin. Oh, sorry. Good.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say that being clear about the terms, if you're doing a job freelance without the union and without your agent, or even with your agent, being clear about the terms before you even accept the job is a good way to make sure that what they have in the contract is what you agreed to. And the other thing is that anything that both parties agree to in an email chain can be legally binding in court. So if you have something in your email that says, this commercial will be used for 13 weeks on local TV, and then you find out it's been playing for 2 years on national TV, you could take that to court and bring the email, exchange, and the client agreed to 13 weeks local TV, and then they would be found at fault for that because they went beyond the scope of what you agreed to in the email. So whatever you write down in writing in your emails is very important, and then they know when they send the contract that that's what should be in there. And so then you have every right, if it says something else, to cross it out and send it back and say, this is I just crossed that out because that's not what we agreed to in the email. Also, I think that's all I was going to say.
Cool.
That's it.
Cool.
No, but I mean, we have to be realistic about the fact that if an employer is coming to you with a contract that you find to be unfair and abusive and potentially limits your ability to work in the future, and they are hard over on that, you still have the choice as to whether or not you want to do that one job that may cancel you out from doing any other jobs, or if you want to, be a business and protect your business interests. We all have that choice. That's probably not what people want to hear, but it is a practical reality of what we do.
Yeah. And I think that's important to know that, obviously standing up for your rights or yourself, it could possibly have some ramifications, some pushback, or just very simply, sorry, we decided to go in a different direction. As long as people,
it's one of the things that organizations like NAVA, for those that do dubbing, organizations like CODA, it's the reason that we exist, because we all need to have the conversation about who's getting paid for what and what are the standards in the industry, because if we all understand that, it makes it much easier for us to stand together. I hear a lot the premise of, well, if I don't do the job, someone else will. Awesome. That is a true statement. The way that we combat that is we educate each other as to what the standards are.
Yeah. Cool. All right, moving on down. So Elaine, this I think this was answered already, but is it a good idea for us to put some sort of language about AI in our pay-to-play profiles from here on in? And what would you recommend that we say? That's a good question, because that may actually already be in the terms of service that you have signed with Voice123 or voices.com or someone's. Can anybody else speak to that, Karin? Do you know that terms of service offhand?
Yeah. So there was a thing that happened with voices.com in 2019 where they partnered with Vocal ID, and people were worried that they were stealing our audio files and giving them to Vocal ID to create synthetic versions of our voices. That turned out to be not the case. Rupal Patel said that their partnership, Rupal Patel, who's the CEO of Vocal ID, said that their partnership was just to find voice actors if they needed them. And once they learned more about voices.com, they pulled their partnership, and there's no longer a partnership between them anymore. That said, they changed their terms of service and specifically said that they will not create synthetic voices from the files, but they also did assert transformative rights over anything that you put on the site,
right?
So that they can caption your demos, and create text versions of the demos that you have up there, create text versions of the auditions that you put up. So, I mean, it's all kind of gray.
Yeah.
Voice 123 also has now AI voices on their site,
Mhm.
along with human voices, and you can opt in to have your audition read by a synthetic voice. So it's all kind of gray, and I would say definitely look into it and look into the terms of service. I haven't heard anything recently that's like very, synthetic voice focused, but it's
Yeah.
not out of the realm of possibility.
And as this could even be in YouTube, it could be in Facebook
It
terms
is on
service,
YouTube,
yeah.
yeah.
So, you upload anything, they're using that audio to train, for machine learning, training their computers, right?
Yeah,
Was
and
there a
also,
thing in Audition that did
Was-
that as well?
yeah,
You know,
Audition,
Well,
Adobe Audition.
Yeah, possibly. We don't know. I mean, that part of this is there's so much that looks terrible. I don't know. I've looked, I don't know what the actual use is. This is part of, we don't know what that agreement is. That's part of the scary part with these things, right?
Yeah, 'cause-
AI is so interesting because basically everywhere you go, in every instance, when you interact with absolutely anything, you are most likely training AI. That's not necessarily you're training a synthetic version of your voice, but you are training AI chatbots. You're training AI voice recognition so that your smart speakers get smarter. Anytime you talk to Alexa in your home, you're probably training AI in some capacity.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so the danger is that you just don't want someone to take your voice, create a synthetic version of it, and have you be out there in the world. And you don't want to make that easier for them by creating a synthetic version of your voice that you give away all rights to.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That actually brings me to another question. And I don't know if this is something that we talked about. Can you have a conflict with your AI voice?
Yes,
You can. Okay.
you can.
Great.
Absolutely.
There we go. So then talking about, Pepsi wants to pay you $5,000 in perpetuity, and now you can't go work for Coke for a major campaign or whatever it might be because you gave away something. Yeah. Yep. All right. It gets more fun the more we talk about this. All right.
We should just we will do a whole webinar on synthetic voices.
Yep,
at some
that we
point
will.
soon.
And as far as language goes, we are working with the vocal variants to have a contract written up that we should actually have tomorrow or Wednesday that we're getting help with, that will be available on the NAVA website. But we're just waiting for the lawyer to put that together. And it'll be based on the tenets that Zeke had shown earlier, as well as a few others. It'll be based on this contract provisions right here. And that will help. The people have access to. Next question. Do we need to be a member of NAVA to be able to access the webinars? Some of them, yes, some of them, no. All of the contract webinars will be open to the public, donation-based, and will then be available for replay on our news page of the website at navavoices.org. There will be some that are member exclusives. And those will be coming probably towards the end of this month. We'll be having our first member exclusive webinar. But for the contracts, this contracts is an industry-wide need, and so we want to make this open to as many people as possible. Okay, moving on down. Does any of this apply to contracts with agents and agencies? If not, are there things to specifically look for in agency contracts? For example, a recent agency contract I got had exclusivity section where I am locked to them regardless of which region I go to. Is that normal? That's Zeke. Can you answer that?
So this is performer contracts. It does not apply to contracts that you have with your agent or manager. Those are governed by this. Well, let's be clear. If you're talking about an agent, those laws are governed by the state in which that agent is registered, because agents are registered with the state and have to abide by certain rules. They're different in different states. If it's a manager, I can put a name tag on that says Zeke Alton manager today, and I can sign you to any contract that's what's called a general services contract. And those general services contracts are much more broad, still regulated by the state. But a perfect example is if you're signing an ATA entertainment contract, or well, they're different for SAG-AFTRA, then your agent will sign you to a maximum of 18 months. A general service management contract can be signed to a maximum of 7 years. So there's a difference there. Furthermore, in an agency contract, they are limited to the amount that they can commission from you by the state to 10%, as opposed to a manager that can commission as much as they feel like. It could be any number because they're not regulated. So what you're really looking at is state labor law with respect to your agents and managers, unless you are SAG-AFTRA with an ATA or SAG-AFTRA approved agency. Because what the ATA is the Association of Talent Agents, and what they do is they sort of neck down the abilities of an agency even more, and the terms tend to be more favorable to the performer. If it's a SAG-AFTRA approved agency, it's even more favorable to a performer. So it sort of goes in levels.
Yeah.
There is, however, at least one agency that I know of where just recently they've started requiring all of their signed talent to be signed with them in every place they have offices. So that's New York, Chicago, LA, and then they also do global, like work in Europe and all over the place. And so they have said any new person signing with us, they are exclusive to us, and they can't work with outside clients besides us. They have to bring us their outside clients. If anyone wants to know who that is, you can send me a PM, but I won't say it in the webinar.
Is that an agency or a management company?
No, it's an agency. It's an agency, a well-known, well-respected agency, I should say also. So if that's, anyway, so I don't think it's out of the, I would say it's definitely not normal, but it is something that sometimes happens.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. Moving on down. Abby Horton. I think this, this was an action. So I recently had force majeure section in a contract where it stated basically if something unforeseen was to happen, that I would have to give a refund of a pro rata portion of the fees. I have never seen this before. Is this usual common? Is this just boilerplate terminology? That's a good, I don't know.
A force majeure provision is generally within every contract. The details of it are not necessarily standard.
Can you explain
Force majeure essentially means acts of God. If you're in the middle of recording something and a typhoon comes and wipes it out and they don't get the product because of it, what happens to the contract? Or if somebody gets in a car accident on the way to the studio and things don't happen. Force majeure is unintended things that could not be predicted. Now, what happens in those instances, I think, is up for debate, and you will see different things within different contracts. And then it's really on you as a performer to figure out what it is that you're willing to accept. I haven't seen anything abusive in a force majeure contract. Maybe you can read what that one was again.
It said that I would give a refund of a pro rata portion of the fees. So meaning
if an act of God or whatever prevented you from delivering the final product, they would only pay you for what they got. That's how I'm reading that.
Might be that's actually that's Abby. She's actually in the chat right now. Abby, can you clarify that? Yes, it's asking for a refund. It's wild. Or was it asking Abby, if you wanted to pop in and just let us know since you're here, that would be fine.
I think it was a big section of text, so I didn't want to paste the whole thing.
Gotcha.
But, it lists all, a bunch of things like pandemics and acts of God and as you described, force majeure, and then at the end it says in the event of the agency termination pursuant to this paragraph and without limiting any other rights or remedies of client shall be entitled to a refund of, or shall be entitled to withhold to the extent not yet paid, a pro rata portion of the fees due to talent reflecting the loss of the client's rights hereunder.
Yeah, what they're saying is anything that you don't deliver because of force majeure, they don't want to pay for or they want a refund of.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that it wasn't after it was delivered, say in 6 months there's a pandemic and something happens and then I have to pay them back half of the fee or something like that. Okay.
No, that sounds from my ear that it is strictly on delivery of what they want to pay for what they got. They don't want to pay for what they didn't get.
Gotcha. Okay,
And
thank
so
you.
that sounds pretty reasonable for force majeure.
Karen, can you drop the question link down? Actually, I got it. I'm gonna drop that link in again, since it's been kind of got lost back there. Go ahead and drop your questions in that doc, so we can all see this, and we'll actually save them for later as well, so we can access those. Okay, Nick C, can we get our contracts, i.e. as a freelance or independent contractor, reviewed by a professional? And would that be an entertainment lawyer or another source? That is a good question. That would be a lawyer, entertainment lawyer.
That would be a
So,
lawyer. And
yeah.
I'll be honest with you, the only way to fully protect yourself is to do it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Because look, I know a lot about contracts, but I'm never going to sign a contract without a legal person looking at it, because I'm not a lawyer. And there are a lot of legal precedents and provisions and definitions of things that I simply don't understand, that whoever on the other side, the lawyer on the other side writing that contract, does understand. So I need a lawyer on my side to ensure that everything is above board. That's just part of being a business.
Yeah, and hopefully, we can find out some people had some suggestions. If you wanted to email us, any people you've worked with, I'm going to drop my direct contact in here. And you can drop it. Yeah, was that?
Yeah, without making any promises, perhaps that's a section that we ought to have at NAVA, or maybe as part of the VORG.
We can, we can look into having some resources. I mean, resources are fine. We can add resources, but we don't have the ability to vet anybody and really know. So if people have worked with somebody and have somebody they recommend, that's fine. Okay, so let's see. Keely, if you are a non-union actor, how do you approach contracts when they are not set like those of SAG-AFTRA to ensure they are fair to you as the actor? In short, what are things that they absolutely should always include, and what should they not include? We saw a few of those. We saw a few of the things to look out for in this, in some of these. I mean, is there, Zeke, we know in perpetuity, all, for here and an eternity, for all mediums, all technologies from here on ever thought of. Danielle, Rob Siglampaglia, yep, that's a name that comes up all the time. Rob is working on our contracts too for the synthetic voices. So Rob is great. If you don't know him, he handled Bev Standing's lawsuit with TikTok. He's a voice actor, and he's very aware of what the voiceover industry does. So sorry, Zeke, yeah.
Well, I think on the whole, if you look at the 6 tenets that are on the screen, that's a really good starting point. I think there is a position here, or there's an opportunity here, since we're working with a lawyer, to come up with standard provisions that ought to be in every contract. I myself have been through most of the contracts that most of the agreements that SAG-AFTRA has, and it's well over 1,000 pages of documents. Each of the agreements are different because they deal with different things. An agreement that deals with TV theatrical is very different than an agreement that deals with commercial. And so not even all of the sections, the agreements as a whole, are not even separated out into the same sort of sections. I am in the middle of reviewing that to figure out what sort of sections should be in every contract. And then once I get that put together, again, I'm going to need to take that to a lawyer. But what we're talking about are things like these 6 tenets here, things like transfer or assumption of rights, things like every contract should have a title and a recognition of scope, things like that, an area of definitions for words that are either unique to copyright or law, or non-standard words that could be misconstrued, should be laid out in your contract. So I don't have that right now, but it is a sort of an ongoing project.
Yeah, and Deborah just left a chat in there. It would be great if NAVA could have an agreement with an entertainment attorney to give us a 15 to 30 minute consult prior to starting the clock. We'll ask around. Yeah, I mean, it might be a possibility that we could bring somebody in to help with that, which then leads into Paul's question down below: is can you share the average cost of hiring a lawyer? It's that's a tough one, depending on who it is, where they are, what city they're located in, how busy they are, availability. My music lawyer, when I hire her, I send her $1,200 at a time, and that gives me usually 4 hours, sometimes 3, depending on what we're doing. But it's going to vary, So, but I like Deborah's idea. If we have enough people who are interested in this, maybe we could find some way to make that worthwhile for the lawyer, so he doesn't just back up with like an 8-hour day full of free 15-minute consultations. But also give us some, because sometimes all it is like, hey, I have a question about this sentence. Should this be, can this be in here, or what does this mean? That sometimes is, is beneficial. All right. Anything else in that topic before we move on down?
I have one thing on that.
Yeah.
One of the things that NAVA is here to do is essentially create a community space for voice performers. So we are able to essentially crowdsource what's out there in contracts right now. And at some point, we will be able to put together some templates and run them through lawyers. So there are templates perhaps for different genres. As long as we all as performers understand that before you actually sign something, regardless of where it comes from, you need to ensure that a lawyer that you trust has put eyes on it. Yeah. So we are going to try and build some building blocks for you, but I would caution anybody from taking any template that they find online and going, that's my contract, and just signing it without actually having an expert look at it.
Yeah. All right, moving on down. Can a sole proprietor have an EIN? I believe so. Yes.
Yes.
You can, right? Yes.
Yes. I am a sole proprietor. I have an EIN. So yes, in California.
You can even have an EIN just as an individual. You just have to get a DBA doing business at.
the chat just went yes. So yes, that's yes. I'm gonna crowdsource that answer as a yes on that one.
One thing I want to add about having a lawyer look at things. If you're signing a lot of contracts a week, it can be really hard to send, 10, 15 contracts to a lawyer for every single contract that you get. And so that's why knowing how to read a contract yourself is really, really important. And that's why, a class like this is important. And, you'll save yourself a lot of money if every single contract you get, you don't have to send to a lawyer. But if you can look through it and see anything that's like a red flag and send just the red flag ones to a lawyer if you need them, then that's a cost savings, and it just makes you smarter and better at your own business.
And I'll add to that, as a matter of practice, I read all the contracts that I get and any provisions that I'm just not sure about. I pull out, I send to my union lawyers, and I say, please look at this. And half the time they're like, no, that's fine, you're overreacting, but that's their job.
Right.
And if you have any sort of legal representative, be it the union or your own private lawyer, that's their job. That's what they get paid for.
And that's a good question. As for SAG-AFTRA members, do we have just that? Can we at any given time say, here's a contract, and reach out to representatives at legal team at SAG-AFTRA?
VO@SAGAFTRA.org.
Okay. And
the SAG-AFTRA department has a department head and what are called business representatives. Those business representatives are tasked with any union job is assigned to a single representative, and is that person's job to work the contract, work the project with the employer. And so you can send any contract in, it will get to the business representative that's in charge of that, and that person will either look at it and tell you, that's fine, or in my experience, they'll look at it and go, okay, these two provisions we don't agree with. They send it up to the legal department, who then goes across to the legal department. And let's be clear how this works. If I'll just take dubbing as an example. If I'm working on a dubbing job and I go in and I meet the dubbing director and even producer, and there's something in the contract that I don't really like, that director, that sound engineer, they didn't write that contract. Somebody way up in that company at the legal department did. So having that conversation across is not as useful as if you have your legal people, in my case, it's SAG-AFTRA, talk to their legal people and fix it. So I send my contracts into the union representatives. They then decide whether that's something that the legal department needs to take care of. And if they do, they give it to legal, who then sends a void notice to the employer that says, yeah, our talent is going to sign your contract, but these provisions are void. Or they'll say, send us back the contract without these provisions in it, and then our talent will sign it. And that's generally how it's worked in my experience.
And in the non-union realm, we have, there's none of that. So
true. But that's why it's so much more important as a non-union independent contractor to understand what it is that you're signing. Because I'm never going to tell anybody they shouldn't sign something. I'm just going to tell people that you have to understand what it is that you're giving.
Yeah, exactly. All right, moving on down. Is it more common to have arbitration be in the state of the client or the state of us, the actor?
Entirely dependent upon the contract that you sign.
Contract. And the contracts would state usually what will lay out what state that was in.
It will lay out, first of all, what the dispute resolution will be, because it doesn't necessarily have to be arbitration. Most companies like to go to arbitration rather than go to court because of the costs involved. So you'll see a lot of arbitration clauses in contracts, but that's not a requirement. And then how the arbitration is handled is, in terms of SAG-AFTRA as a reference, it is an appendix to the agreement that says this is how we do dispute resolution. But it is not guaranteed, so it should be explicitly said where.
Gotcha. And the VO at SAG-AFTRA will not review a contract for a non-union actor. You have to be in the union, but they will, as Lindsay said, they may want to see the contract though. Is that something they would want to see, Zeke? I mean, they want to know what's out there.
Yeah.
In there,
I'll say we, right? Because the union is members, and there are committees at the union made up of members. So it's not just the staff, but as a committee member at the union, I want to see what's out there in contracts. Yeah. Because as we try to capture more work and to make it easier for non-union members to join the union or to get their work covered by the union, we have to understand how that work is happening.
Yeah, cool. Moving on down. Okay, so here's a good question. When is it? Well, they're all good questions. Here's another good question. When is it okay to do in perpetuity? I would think audiobooks at per finished hour and video games would be in perpetuity already. Sometimes.
Video games currently are in perpetuity. That's because we didn't negotiate well. That's the only reason.
And audiobooks are in perpetuity. And
I would say you need to look at, is what you're doing going to create a conflict down the line, or is it going to prevent you from doing further work on down the line? If it's not, sometimes in perpetuity is fine. I personally, and this is just a personal example, if I'm doing an intercompany video under a co-ed sort of structure, I'm more than happy to do that in perpetuity. It's a work made for hire. I do the thing, you use the thing. As opposed to a commercial where I do the thing for you and then you continue to profit off the continued use of it.
Right.
That's where in perpetuity doesn't work for me, where if you continue to profit off of something that I've done.
Which happens in audiobooks and video games.
It does.
You see in those.
It does.
So that's down the line.
Yeah, the union is always working to try and better the conditions under which performers work by getting more usage, more residual, more royalty. It's just a constant negotiation process.
Yep. Cool. Moving on down. Jen Losey. Hi, Jen. So here is actually, this is an interesting question. VO contracts are often coming in after sessions and sometimes not at all. Can we get any assistance from the union to get the studios to get these sent to us? Are there any rules about when the contract has to be delivered by? I mean, if you don't have a contract, you theoretically can't work.
Correct.
I mean, it's not a contract?
It depends on the broader agreement. Generally, the performer contract is due before the start of work. In some contracts, it's required at least 24 hours before the start of work. If it is a union job, regardless of your status, if it is a union job and you're not getting the contract with enough time, then you simply call the union and they claim it. They essentially go to the employer and say, you're not holding up your end of the agreement. You have to actually provide this ahead of time. If you're not union, then again, it's a debate between you and the employer and what you initially put in the contract as when it's supposed to be served or executed.
Okay.
But for the union, for the most part, it's within 24 hours or prior to the first day of work.
But there shouldn't ever be any work without a contract in place.
No, and look, let's be honest and practical, that does occur. There's a little bit more coverage if you're doing a union job because you have the big legal team standing behind you. If they decide they don't want to pay you, you can actually file a claim and have your set of lawyers that you don't pay for handle it.
Well, and I guess, and this also comes back to, if you have anything in that email, you have that email chain, chain that you had, then you have some recourse. At least you have something in writing that's going to lay out what it is. So if you do get that contract and it's different, you can look back and say, hey, this is what this and what our original agreement was when we went into this.
Correct.
Cool. Let's see. Yeah, and Jen's leaving some chats and there's some examples of that in the chat there. Here's a good question. Sonny Ray's asking, what is a loan out? Because this gets used. It's actually not even something that I'd ever heard of until I started working as a signatory in SAG-AFTRA. What is a loan out?
So if you have not heard of the term incorporating, that is when normally if you're working as a freelancer, you can be hired as an individual. So my name is Zeke Alton, and you can hire me as Zeke Alton. If you do that, you're either paying me as an independent contractor, and you'll receive what's called a 1099 form for tax purposes, or you're hiring me as an employee, and that's when you get a W-2 for tax purposes. If you want some sort of liability protection or tax shelter between you and the larger employer, you can incorporate into an LLC or an S Corp, or is it a C Corp? I might need Karin to jump in here.
C Corp, yeah, C Corp's S Corp, LLC. That's a limited liability company first, which are different from S Corps and C Corps.
Yeah,
but yes, they are loan outs.
All of them, essentially what they do is provide a business structure over you as an individual. And so that business is taxed in a different way, and that business is treated in a different way. And what happens is it can be a single person. So say my company was Super Cool Voiceover, and the only employee of that company is Zeke Alton. Well, if I then work for a company, they're not hiring Zeke Alton, they're hiring Super Cool Voiceover, and they pay Super Cool Voiceover business to business. They loan out my services as part of that company.
Yeah. And that's where the loan out. Yeah. That's where that. So yeah, loan out. So essentially if you're a company separate from an employee, then you are a loan out at that point. All right. Keely, how do you know how to write a contract? How do you know how to write a contract provision to submit? This was in reference to slides 7 and 8. How do you know how to write that?
Essentially, how do you put these 6 tenants into contractual language?
So yeah, these are the 6 tenants that we are actually having a lawyer work on right now. And we'll have these hopefully tomorrow or Wednesday. We'll have our first draft of this.
Yeah, we are putting the building blocks of this together for you.
Yeah, and how do you write your own? I know typos are just a pain, I tell you. So we will have this as something that can be used as a rider or an addendum, or something that you can look at and say, add into your contract in some way whatsoever. But how do you write your own? Hopefully, for these particular things in slides 7 and 8, we will have something for you, lawyer approved, that you can add into your contracts. Again, just keep in mind that anytime you present somebody with something that's different than what they presented you, or you question or you push back, you could get potentially pushed back from the other side, and also the potential that they're going to go in a different direction. So just be aware of that when you take that stand, or when you send that back to somebody, that is a potential thing to happen. And unfortunately, there's nothing you can do about that. If they decide to go in a different direction, they decide to go in a different direction for a million different reasons. Unfortunately, in that case. Let's see. Next one was already answered. Okay. Here's a good one. From Aiden. Super specific question. Okay. So this actually gets. I kind of deal with that a lot here. I think it's a question that we has come up with before. People have dealt with. Say you sign an NDA, then you book the job. Hooray! Now you want to do a coaching session to help you bring your best to the role. Is there a way for you to bring that material to the coach without breaking the NDA? Or is this just not an option for jobs with NDAs? That's a good question.
Legally, no.
Yeah.
But there's legally, and then there's what's standard practice. So I guess the easiest way for me to start talking about this is from a union perspective, because I understand the rules more concretely there. Mm-hmm. And that is, any NDA from any job that is a union job that has not been filtered by the union considers null and void. So if the union hasn't approved the NDA, you can sign whatever you want and tell anybody anything you want.
Okay.
That being said, within reason, right? Because we do understand the financial impacts of giving away secrets of things like Marvel movies and TV shows and stuff like that. They're very important.
Yeah.
If you are not in the union, well, there's one more aspect of that. Regardless of what NDA you sign, take a look at the Naughty Dog NDA that's on here. Regardless,
Mandalorian has 120-page NDA. Yeah, I can imagine.
yeah,
Yeah,
but no NDA. If you're working a union job, no NDA that you ever sign prevents you from talking to your union.
Mm.
Just to be clear of that.
Yeah.
It also does not in any way prevent you from talking to your agent.
Mm.
So there's always somebody that you can talk to. I mean, the audition or the job comes through your agent, so you're eligible to talk to them without breaking the NDA. And the union is the union. So there's no way that an employer can tell you cannot speak. I mean, that doesn't jive with labor law.
Yeah.
And so that is again one of the advantages that most people are not aware of when you're in the union. If you're not, you need to be very clear about what it is that you're signing, because you are signing a legal document. And generally the penalties for NDAs in practical terms are they'll fire you, but in legal terms, the language there essentially allows them to recoup whatever unknown financial losses are due to you giving away their secrets.
Right. Yeah.
That's vague and scary as hell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know that the general thought from when I've heard this from coaches is that, this is for educational training purposes. And as long as it doesn't ever leave here, we don't record it, we can discuss it. But that's, that's entirely up to, like where you feel it's going to go. From coaches, that's what I've heard, that it falls under a somewhat, educational standpoint. Whether there's any legal validity to that or not, I don't know. But that's
and having
having
talked to plenty of producers across different genres, they're not afraid of you using it in training. They're afraid of you putting your audition on social media. They're afraid of you going out and say, I'm in XX game or XXX TV show, before they are ready to control that narrative. And that's where they're really going to get upset with you.
Or going live from the booth, or taking a picture of even implying something. Could you have your coach self-sign an NDA? I guess then now you're getting into the coach have to sign the NDA of the company that's in the first place, and that's now you got to go back to the company and say, can I have my coach? Yeah. Doesn't belong to you, it's not your share.
You couldn't hold them to an NDA, but they would have to sign on to the company's NDA.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But that's a good question. It's a gray area. Legally, I think that it's not as much of a gray area, that you can't share with anybody, which means you can't share with a coach. But as we talked about, as someone said, it's the practicality of it being leaked live and something like that. So
here's a perfect example of the impracticality of some NDAs that comes from the on-camera world as well. And this applies to folks that do performance capture and even VO. Yeah. If I receive an audition that requires a reader to be done on tape, you're requiring me, unless the company provides me a reader and a space, that company is requiring me to violate the NDA in order to find a reader to give the material to. These are conversations that we've had with the companies, and they understand the difficult place that we're put in. But we as talent also have to understand that there are folks out there going out on social media with their booth photo, showing people where they are, what performance volume they're in, or talking about stuff when they shouldn't have. So there is a common sense layer to this as well.
With the script in the background. Yeah. Let's see, with the script in the background. Absolutely. Yep. Or the, wow, what are these black dots on my face for? What could I be doing? All right. Moving on down. Jeff, curious to see what that anti-deep fake legislation in California looks like. This is a good question. Do we know? There's no national legislation about this. There, New York and California are the only two that have anything in the works. Zeke, what do you know about this?
So it was spearheaded by SAG-AFTRA in LA, because for those who don't know, SAG-AFTRA has what's called a Government Affairs and Public Policy Committee, a national one and a local one for each local. And so that group is where we have our own lobbyist and people who are well-versed in government and can write legislation and can talk to our elected leaders to try and get that legislation pushed. So one of the things that SAG-AFTRA did over the last few years was put in a deepfake bill. And the impetus to that, where it started, was essentially pornography of female celebrities that was done in deepfake. And it was to protect that person's ability to sue someone if they were for defamation, or essentially hurting their brand or loss of future wages by deepfaking them in porn.
Yeah, and actually, Lawrence dropped that link in the chat for everybody if you want to take a look at that.
Yeah,
attach information on those. Yeah, those two, the two parts of that are in there. Yeah.
Now,
that's first. I hadn't seen that before. I mean, it's just like, it's been around for what, that was 2020, and then it's. I mean, that still is essentially. I'm sure we heard about it when it first happened, but it certainly isn't anything that's been discussed or that I have heard talk about. Or
these things are in the work.
So,
these things are in the works all the time. Because the Government Affairs and Public Policy, at least SAG-AFTRA as a union, is constantly working for the betterment of its members and of entertainers in general. But there are also, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, there was a House bill put into Congress maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And the intent of that was to ensure that anytime anyone used a synthetic interaction, that the law required them to be notified that they weren't speaking to a human. I think that died in committee, if we all remember our Schoolhouse Rock and how that tends to happen. But that legislation is something that is continually being pushed by legislators as we sort of move into this new era of being able to replicate people's name, likeness, performance, face, and all of that stuff. What are the legal boundaries of where you're allowed to do that?
I mean, it's almost like having something labeled as non-GMO, so you know whether it's real or fake. If I'm watching content or I'm listening to a podcast or I'm, deep faking politicians. Absolutely. Yeah. You get somebody to say something that supposedly they said. I mean, that I don't know if you've ever seen the Tom Cruise deep fake. That guy is good. That's some scary stuff, So.
And there's, it's not going to run rampant for too long, because the ability for someone to deepfake your voice, if banking systems are using voice detection to allow access to your accounts,
right.
That's an American problem. That's not an entertainment problem. It's not a VO problem. That is a safety and security of American data and life problem. And so that will get addressed. And those things are in work. You can research them at SAG-AFTRA. And I think here at NAVA, we advocate specifically for our group to try and ensure that we all know what those standards are or should be, and so that we're educated in it.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah, so Catherine has, there's something, I've said something recently about this, somebody used, somebody posted earlier, you can take, takes 3 seconds of audio to create a synthesized voice now from, as Microsoft is able to do with their technology. So yeah, you could do this and you could fake out, you'd call do a fake recording, call somebody's parents and get them to sign over money. And all that's going to be, terrifying. Absolutely. Yeah. All right.
I can add a little bit of expansion on that HR bill. One of the other facets of that bill, and I think, and my personal opinion as to one of the reasons it wasn't as successful as it could have been, was they were also trying to ensure that there was some sort of digital watermark on anything that was synthetically created. And at the time, 3 years ago, when that bill was introduced, that technology was not mature enough to be able to do that.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see what we got here. Torian, slide 10 question. What exactly counts for implied consent? Just signing a contract or the absence of active consent in a contract? Can you pull it? You got that up there? Okay. Yeah, let's go through this again. This is a good one.
If you don't, generally, this is sort of a common sense approach. If you don't explicitly articulate what kind of consent you're signing over, if you sign over rights, it's assumed that you're giving all rights.
All rights, okay.
And generally, if you look at your contracts, they are explicit in that you're giving all rights. Hence the language, any technology or use now and in the future throughout the universe in perpetuity, that is set up to give passive rights.
Yeah, okay, cool. Torian, hopefully that made sense. And silence is construed as consent. So, okay, so in that case, that's where passive consent comes in. Silence is passive consent. Is that
for the most part, and that's why you see. And again, I'll go back to the union as a reference. If you sign a union performer contract, it's not explicit, and so the union takes the stance that you do not have passive consent. That's why companies add a rider or an assignment of rights that explicitly grants them those things.
Gotcha. Okay.
And oftentimes the union will look at it and go, "Yeah, no, you can't do that because that's what we call a mandatory subject of bargaining." Because we are a union, you have to bargain for that right. You can't just sign it away.
Gotcha. Okay. And then we have a question. Do we have an example of what a consent paragraph looks like in a contract? And is it something subheaded or hidden? Your question is it just basically like dropped into the middle, or is it just going to be somewhere in consent, like usage, right?
So you'll see a section in most of your contracts that's either entitled results and proceeds or assignment of rights or just rights. And that's where they talk about who gets new exploitative rights, transformative rights, moral rights, IP rights. All of that stuff would generally fall into that section.
Cool. Moving down, in question for Elena, question slide 12. How can we track where our work is being aired and used other than going down the YouTube rabbit holes, etc.? Zeke and I have been talking about this one for
I'll let you take this one, Tim.
For 2 years now. We are working on a potential tracking system for audio. And that is as far as we've gotten in that. But because there is no way to track your audio if it gets used in a region you're not in, if it gets going to air for 2 years extra on 9 o'clock in the morning before you're up, which is my time when I get up, and my stuff's being aired on CBS that I don't know about. I'm not going to see it. You don't know. Now, everything is the person we're talking to. Everything is trackable. Every advertiser, every person in ad knows exactly where that spot was played, when it played, how long it played, what it played before, what it played after. The audience that saw it, the audience that probably should see it, they can tell you everything about that spot. We should be able to know where our audio is being used. The problem is that if audio gets manipulated and be counted as different, it's like see things on Secret Galaxy when they reference old toy commercials. So yeah, so manipulation of a voice, taking a voice and reconstituting it in some other format or something else. Yeah, I mean, if you actually take that particular audio file, we're working on some workaround for that as well. Manipulated, how can you manipulate the voice and still keep it tracked? We have a meeting this week again about that, and I'm saying that's probably going to be a 6 months to 9 months, if not longer, off before that technology exists.
And so we're aware of the general philosophy of how copywriting and things like that work. The protection of your name and likeness is intended to prevent you from libel or slander that is recognizably you. So if you're a politician, you don't want somebody to be able to make a model of you saying things that you wouldn't say as a politician to affect your ability to do work or to ruin your reputation. If something is modified so much that it's no longer recognizable as you, that's where copyright law gets really gray.
Yeah.
Because then it's not really about ruining your brand or hurting your reputation in public. Now it's about tracking the original performance, and that's where Tim's talking about. The technology for that is in its raw form. We're still working on that.
And now we're in, now we're in sampling. They've been doing happening in music for years, right? You've been sampling. How do we get, Clyde Stubblefield or whoever else the rights for their music that was used, and it'll be the 30% ultra rule. It's slippery sample. So yeah, samples, and but the precedent is there. The precedent is in the music industry. The precedent is there. So I think there's some comparable stuff that we can go. That's what does the 30% ultra look like? All right. Let's see. Do we need? Let's see. There we go. Is it possible for NAVA to lobby for certain stipulations? Getting to model your voice without asking, signing away rights that may be created in the future, for example, to be illegal for employers to put into contracts. We're 8 weeks old. I think we're a long ways away from the lobbying arm of NAVA, but I mean, somebody. So yeah, thank you, Lindsay. Thank you.
We have dedicated lobbyists at SAG-AFTRA, and look, even if you're not a member of the union, it is SAG-AFTRA's mandate to protect performers. So there are very few people who make the majority of their money in voice acting who are in leadership at the union. I myself am one of them. And so that is why I am on the government and policy committee. That's why I'm on the governance committee, because I speak on behalf of us, the voice people. So we are having conversations about, okay, what do we need to take to Washington? What do we need to take to Sacramento? What kind of things do we need to be working on? So NAVA, through me and the other people like Tim, who do a lot of volunteer work at the union, are the conduit to bring these things forward with legislation, so we don't have to go hire our own lobbyists.
Yeah, and this, it's a good, good point about, about what we are as NAVA, is that, I consider our plan is to be this bridge for the voiceover community, and to be able to bring in these assets and the power that the union has, and the ability, the size of the community that we have in the non-union realm, and bring this together for the benefit of voice actors across the spectrum, regardless of union or non-union or FICO or non-jurisdictional. So that's where I think we sit in NAVA, is this ground that is pro voiceover first, and that is all voice actors. Zeke and I happen to be, two very active SAG-AFTRA members, but our board is a mix of non-union and FICO and SAG-AFTRA members, and that's by design, to make sure that we get as much of this industry, the voiceover industry, covered as possible. But we have that, there's a, if the lobbying exists, and we can maybe not lobby necessarily the legislature, but we can lobby SAG-AFTRA, who then has the power to lobby on our behalf. And I think that's really where our immediate power and benefit comes in, is that we can have these conversations immediately with those who can take these in from this up with the people who can make the change on the legislative, legal law side of things.
Well, because if we don't bring our issues to them, they're not going to go find them by themselves.
Right. And yeah, exactly.
So,
yeah. Yep. All right. Moving on down. I'm told I need to have my podcast guest sign a model release. Do I need to have anything else in place contract wise? That is a good question. I guess
what is a model release?
Yeah, is that so? I've seen those, but on camera usually, at least when I've seen those, and like other things. Grace, can you, if you're still here? Yeah, is that same as a talent release, or is that, yeah? Are you still here?
No, I'm here. I was
Awesome.
told a model release is something they sign.
Oh, there we go.
Saying that
Lisa.
they're not going to make money, but saying that they're not going to
Mm.
make any money off of it or collect any fees.
Okay. And then a consent for people's faces to be on camera allows use with photo models usually, and then it's like to use image and promo. Okay. Are you filming the podcast as well, or is it just audio?
It's a video podcast.
Okay. Yeah, then maybe because they're on camera, they're not getting paid. You do need to have there we go. Okay, there we go. Jennifer's asking this one. You do need to have your podcast guest sign a release, or they can revoke your right to use their voice in the future. If they do this, you have to remove the episode they appeared in.
Got it. Okay. Awesome.
Yeah. So hopefully that helps. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you.
Cool. And you stop sharing. Look at you stop sharing there.
So I could read some of the chat and answer some of the questions as they come in.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's move on down. Would one be unhireable if one doesn't consent to synthetic voice modeling or stipulates against it? This is a great question. I mean, would you be unhireable? I don't know. If you were to push against it, somebody just may choose to go in a different direction. I mean, that is definitely a potential. And I guess maybe this is kind of a whole other discussion, I guess, which is we talk a lot about the negative sides of AI and synthetic voices, but how can we as voice actors find the positive side of this and gain our power to provide? We literally are providing these voices, so we need to have our say in this. Zeke, yes.
So those 6 tenets are not necessarily a prohibition
Right.
on using your voice using AI to make a synthetic double. All they are is essentially, if you choose to do that, you should be able to put parameters around it to ensure that you continue to have a career. Because wouldn't it be great if the synthetic voice was good enough to actually model you for a commercial, and they would pay you a proper commercial rate just by using your model, right? That would be great, as long as you understood exclusivity, you understood what the compensation was, there were limits on what they could do with it, that you had active consent for.
Yeah.
So I myself am not anti-AI or synthetic double. I just want it to be bounded so that me as the working performer can continue to have a career as we adopt and use this new technology.
Yeah, and I think I mean, for musicians, I want somebody to take my song and use that, take it out there, put it anywhere, put it in 1 million shows, put it in 1 million, pay me my royalties, right? I see Stuart's giving the thumbs up there. Yeah, so we can. I think it's important to have that. This is a whole discussion again, but I think it's important to know how we can benefit from this. And the problem is that a lot of this is taking place without our knowledge. We're being told what's going to happen as opposed to having the ability to determine what happens with our voice. If Karen were still here, she would talk about she's licensed out her synthetic voice for 2 jobs this year, and it's being used for something that's not a conflict. It's making her money. Another example she uses is, it's physically impossible for somebody to narrate the New York Times every single night, but you can license out your voice, and my synthetic voice will narrate the New York Times every single, narrate as many papers as you want. Pay me for that usage. Pay me for the limitations on that. Compensate the voice actor fairly for that. I see that as being a positive in something that we can control and benefit from, and hopefully create more work for ourselves as voice actors, as opposed to looking at it as taking work from us. There's always going to be this decimation of certain parts of any industry that we're in. Certain parts of voice acting are going to go away regardless of whether we like them or not, whether we want them to or not, whether we fight against them or not. But I'm a big proponent of not being caught in the music industry circa 1994 and watching Napster having taken every single thing that we ever wanted to do with our careers and just made it public or put it out there. So that is NAVA's stance as well. Our public statement is that we are not anti-synthetic or AI, but we are pro voice actor, and voice actors need to be a part of this conversation. That's where we're pushing with that. And so I would encourage everybody to look at this. Yes, we absolutely can be anti-AI, and we can rally against this, and we can push against this, we can fight against it. We're 5 years too late already to keep it out of the industry. So what do we do now? How do we ensure that going forward, we have a say in this? Because they literally are building these synthetic voices on our voice. We are literally the voice of these new synthetic products, these voices, these synthetic things that are out there. So that's my soapbox for the day. Kittens out of the box burned down. Kittens. Yeah, exactly. It's gone. So
well, you'll hear the term use case a lot, right?
Yeah.
And so there are a lot of different use cases out there, like Tim was talking about. So I'll give an example of one in video games. Say I were to work with a video game company and license my voice to be used as a model. Say I weren't there, and here's a little peek into the future of what the interactive contract looks like. There's a term called integration. If I go record lines for a video game and the company wants to lift those lines and put them in the sequel, they have to pay me again an integration payment, either to move the whole thing or 300 scale payment, whatever my total base pay scale payment per 300 lines that they move. Now, as technology advances, who's to say that I cannot allow them to make a digital copy of my voice, and if they're going to go in and ADR or add new lines, that they pay me that scale payment every 300 newly generated lines. So there's a use case within a genre that fits with how the genre currently pays, that allows them to save time by not hiring a studio and not having to schedule me, but still allows me to be compensated for my work. Yeah.
And Rachel put a good comment down there, is that it's important for us to be mindful of what happens when either a company is bought or sold. For example, Vocal ID and Veritone have merged. And so what has happened with those audio files? I think some people were at Vocation in New York last year when the rep from Veritone was asked, "Hey, I recorded with Vocal ID. What happened to my audio files?" And their response was, I don't know. So
that's the
I'm sure
importance.
And this was just somebody who was sent out to be, to talk at a convention about this, but that's a very important question that everybody should know. So I recorded for you. Where are my audio files? Oh, I can tell you exactly where they are. They're here. This is our server. They're under whatever it might be. So, all right, we got a few more questions. Let's keep on moving down through that.
Let me add to that, Tim, right before we go on. That is the importance of the concept that I pointed out, called it transfer or assumption of rights.
Yeah.
Essentially, what happens with the contract between me and you, Tim, if I then sell my company to someone else? Yeah. Do those rights transfer? And that has to be put in the original contract between you and I.
Yep. Cool. We've got a lot left here, so I want to see if we can get on through these. We can always reach out to us. We are going to have more of these, so if there's some specific things, we are going to go through all contracts, SAG-AFTRA contracts for voice actors in detail. This is step one in our contract series that we have. So maybe we can get some of these other questions. If we can't answer them tonight, we can get into detail on some other ones. So let's take a look though real quickly at what we have next. If I prefer not to deal with contracts, which are confusing, would a talent management company be able to protect us and manage our contracts?
If you,
I mean, that's
if you trust that person,
if you trust them,
yeah.
And if you have the right agent, the right manager you trust to be able to, I think it's still important. It's important to know some of these, some real kind of basic terms that we should look for, which we talked about here: synthesizing voices, transformative rights, some other things in perpetuity that you could scroll through real quickly without having to understand that contract, but look for certain phrases in there that you could find. And then yes, if we have a have an agency or manager that you trust, absolutely. But their interest might not be yours. They want their commission. So if you trust them, great. If not, exactly, then you're up against something. All right. Amanda, do you recommend we have a contract for every pay-to-play job as well? And is anything good to do in perpetuity? Is it okay to do anything in perpetuity? Yeah, I think we that kind of got referenced earlier when we talked about certain things. I don't know, how good anything is to do, but if you're talking about, non-broadcast, something that's not going to keep making money down the line, then, a buyout in those. And that's very common for, non-broadcast, non-podcast, co-ed industrial jobs that are not going to be broadcast. Yeah.
And each genre is specific. So there tends to be no usage payments for things like promo and trailers, because they have a very finite life. Once the show shows, you don't use the promo advertising the show on Thursday anymore. Yeah. So those are generally buyouts. So it really is dependent upon the type of work and the use case.
Yep. All right, Dominic. Sorry, missed one. Danielle, I am non-union and I have an agreement that outlines the basics. Should I have all these contracts that will need to be signed all the time? Like, should I have my own NDA, AI contract, et cetera, every time I do a job? Or can you do essentially voiceover contract, general voiceover contract that would cover you in all cases?
If you're a non-union performer and you have a sort of a general contract template of what it is to hire you, yes, I would just urge you to, again, be able to tailor it to different use cases.
Cool. All right. This refers to working in different countries. Are there any important things to note when working for clients in different countries? And are contracts similarly predatory everywhere you go for the work?
I try not to talk about things I don't know much about. I will say this. The SAG-AFTRA rules have a very defined jurisdiction, and that is within the United States. IP and copyright law differs depending on which country you are in. Intellectual property rights are much more in favor of the performer in places like Europe than they are in the United States. But because I don't work there, I can't speak on what those rules specifically are. You'd have to, I would say, find a local lawyer in whatever geographic region your contract is being held in.
Yeah. All right, moving on down. As non-union, should we always put audio watermarks on our auditions, especially on pay-to-plays? I think there's a lot of auditions, a lot of places that say specifically do not put any watermarks. We want to accept anything with watermarks. There are some people will cut out words in certain spots. It's twofold in there. Is that some places they take it personally, that they assume that you already think they're trying to steal something by doing that. And then second, it's hard to actually listen. If you have a word cut out, it's hard to really put that into something and listen to it, or if it has a watermark in there. This is why, one of our very first sessions was for our system is watermarks, but it instantly got ruled out because there's just no way you can't keep an audio watermark on the final project going forward. It's not possible. But I know, I do see, I see auditions from agents that very specifically say no watermarks of any kind. I think on some of the pay-to-plays at one point, there was something in their terms of service about no watermarks. If talking about, for anybody who doesn't know what a watermark is, it could be a beep, it could be some kind of other audio that renders that entire audio file unusable to go to air, and that's potential. But I think it's more There's a better way to do it, I think. And hopefully that's something that we're gonna find. So, yeah, I'd love to know that it can be removed if hired, but I was wondering if there's a better way. Yeah, it is. Yeah, there definitely is. It definitely is something that for a while, I want to say in probably like 2015, 2016, that was a huge thing. Everybody was putting watermarks in. Everybody was cutting out the last 3 words of an audition, moving things around. It definitely is possible. It's something you can put on there and you can let somebody know. And I guess it's more of a case by case. If you have somebody, that you think it wouldn't be a problem, you have that rapport with them. That's something that you at this point have to look at from a business owner and see if that's something that is going to cause more problems than what it's going to solve. But I still think there's a better way to do it besides an audio watermark. I think there's a better way to secure and track our audio than that. Yeah, Slate can just be cut out. So there's got to be something that can't be removed, but there's also not going to destroy the track that's there. So it is still usable but trackable. All right, Lisa, can we get a legal blurb stating we have a copyright or own our own voice print and do not consent to it being used outside specific contracts, etc.? You actually asked me this the other night, Lisa, and I checked with Robert. And if you're talking about like a disclaimer on your website, is kind of what you were saying. He said his initial response to that was no. There's not a way to do that. But we could look at that in maybe some other avenue to secure that. But based on the question you asked me tonight, and based on how I referenced it to him, translated it to him. It's been a long day, y'all. All right. Katrina, what about contacting Legal Shield and sharing a specialized contract? I guess this would be, maybe it's kind of along the lines of what somebody referenced earlier about maybe possibly finding somebody to help us, to provide resources to NAVA that we could access. Is that kind of what Katrina, you were asking? Or I'm not familiar with Legal Shield, so I'd have to look them up. But yeah, potentially. Everything's possible. I don't know if that's the question.
I would
could be a thing. Yeah.
I would caution that there is no one size fits all, because the industry that we're in is so broad and the genre categories are so different that you're never going to be able to write a simple template contract that works for looping, ADR, dubbing, commercials, co-ed, industrial, narration, video games, all in one document.
Yeah.
We as an organization and as a community together can start to build that silo, but it's the reason that the union has different contracts for commercial. There's 37 different categories of contract at the union. So we can start. There's nothing that prevents us from starting now.
Yep, absolutely. And just to go back, so in this kind of watermark discussion, and this is exactly why we have this. In my experience, has been different, but Danielle and Tony have found some success with adding watermarks in there, and hopefully, if you find it's beneficial, and you're not having any pushback, then it's great. It's something that you can actively do to protect your audio. That's great. I just know that from my experience, I've seen many times where it said specifically no watermark. So that's the only reason why I say that. But your mileage may vary, and if you can find a way to do this that protects you, then by all means, definitely go for it. And if you want to share, at some point with what kind of watermark that is, I'm sure people would be interested. So not the ones we don't ask for it yet. Exactly. And I haven't seen. It's been a long time since I've seen that specifically in there. I think it just happened for a long time. Everybody just kind of got used to the fact that we can't put watermarks, or we shouldn't put watermarks on things on our side of things. All right, moving on. Karin, does FICOR have someone that reviews contracts? No. You are not a member of the union. You are a fee-paying non-member of SAG-AFTRA, and you have no safety, security, contract help, legal. FICOR is not an entity. It is a designation of, yes. So it is a designation, union, non-union, and FICOR is one of those designations as a dues fees paying non-member of SAG-AFTRA. So no, that you would have the same access as a non-union person would, which is none. Okay, here we go. It's a good question from Terry. Audiobooks are in perpetuity. Does that mean that the author can take that audio and use it in a different medium, such as a YouTube video? Zeke.
Depends
We
on
have-
depends
yeah,
on the usage signed for.
And what it was signed for, yeah.
In general, it is understood in union contracts that any contract you write is for the individual project and the medium in which it was used. I think it's good to advise people who are not in union or working non-jurisdictionally that you explicitly put that language information into the scope of your contract. The scope of this contract is for use within audiobooks and nothing else. Unless further bargained or negotiated with the performer. That way, if they want to take it and then use it in YouTube or something else, and they come back to you to bargain again.
Yeah. All right, and we have one last question. How much time between receiving a contract and deciding whether to accept it in part or in full is considered standard acceptable? Right away. Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we know how fast this moves. We know how fast the industry moves. That you book it out. You audition today, you book the job tonight, you got to record tomorrow morning. You don't have a lot of time to sit on that. So I guess this is where it becomes beneficial to be as educated as possible to know what to look for in these contracts. That we can scan these, we can find them. If we don't have time to read this entire contract because we have to record in an hour, you can scan for in perpetuity, you can scan for other things that we want to, transformative rights, synthetic clauses in there that you can command F or whatever and shift and search for these terms. So all right, it is 6 o'clock. Whoo, holy cow, I knew this was going to be a lot. This was just the intro. So I'm going to drop, for anybody who would like to, I'm going to drop the Brad Venable donation link again one more time in there. You can find us at navavoices.org. You can contact me at tim@navavoices.org. We will have a replay of this. We will also have the slides available that Zeke put up. We will be continuing on with this. Our goal is to do this once a month. If you would like to know about our next information, sign up for the newsletter at navavoices.org. If you have not a member yet, definitely we encourage everybody to check out the membership area and apply and join us. If you're interested in the healthcare, our access to healthcare closes on Friday. This is a national healthcare plan for freelance voice actors that you have access to. And if you have any questions about that, you can also contact me, tim@navavoices.org. All right. Any parting words, Zeke, that we would like to leave our notes on? So
yeah, I just want to express to everybody, thank you for again spending some of your holiday time here. And remember that we are a community. And so the only person that's going to advocate tooth and nail for us is us. So I'm a big fan of not relying on other people to do our work for us. We are all smart enough, we are all savvy enough to take care of ourselves if we just put in a little bit of effort to do that. Tim and Karin have created NAVA, which is a wonderful workspace for us to do that. So I'll see you at the next one. I'm here to talk about contracts for the next couple of years, every couple of weeks or whatever, and we'll all learn together.
Yeah, and definitely, and some people had some resources and mentioned a few things. If you wanted to send us that information, that would be great. We're always looking for more resources, especially outside of LA and New York, where we happen to know a lot of the stuff. There's a whole other part of this country that is a massive group of voice actors, professional voice actors working, making a living, dealing with these things every day outside of LA and New York that we don't always get to see. And we would love to see, to know more about that and to learn more about that. So anything that you would like to share with us, please let us know. We will have on the NAVA website, there's a news page, says navavoices.org/news or NAVA News. It just says news on there. All of our past webinars are up there, and this one will be up there. I have to go to rehearsal in 15 minutes, so I'm going to leave and go to rehearsal when I come back after my auditions tonight. So this will probably be up tomorrow. Or late in the evening tomorrow, as soon as I can get it up there. So that's where all the stuff will be housed. That is open to everybody. You don't have to be a NAVA member. There is a members only section of NAVA, but all of these resources will be available under the community section of NAVA that everybody has access to. So with that said, thank you all for joining us. We still have 100 and some people here. This 2 hours into the night, we had 285 people register for this. So thank you all for coming to become educated and learning so that we can help ourselves the more we can do for ourselves, the more we do as a community on here. So thank you all so much. I will see you all at the next one. Go. All right. See y'all.